I know Max, he's a good person. I mean, I always thought he was a very good person. And I'm going to let the families figure that out. But it's accusations, and I'm going to let them figure that out.
President Trump publicly standing by embattled Republican Congressman Max Miller, even as his former press secretary launches a new legal battle against Miller. So on Monday, Stephanie Grisham's lawyer filed for a temporary restraining order against Miller. Now, she's suing him for breaking the terms of a non-disclosure agreement, an agreement that stems from 2021. In a Washington Post op-ed, Grisham had written about abuse allegations dealing with an ex-boyfriend, and Miller sued her at the time, but they settled out of court and agreed not to disparage each other publicly. Grisham now claims Miller violated the deal in this interview back in June.
Without question, every allegation should be taken seriously. What should be noted is that allegation came out on the same day as somebody's book launch. And the other part what I would like to discuss is my ex-wife was with me every single day during that time of my life in that election. And she, in her own words, will tell you that I never did any of those things, and she never saw evidence of me ever doing those things, and that was nothing more than somebody trying to get notoriety.
Joining the group chat, Harry Lee, political correspondent at Spectrum News. She conducted that interview with Congressman Miller. This is a fascinating conversation that you got to have with him. Before we get to the allegations within his family and ex-wife, can you talk about this issue with Stephanie Grisham, why they are all of a sudden back in court?
Well, they're back in court partly because of that interview. In their non-disclosure agreement back in 2021, it appears this was a confidential agreement, so we didn't know until she filed this suit. But it appears that they agreed not to disparage each other. And she's saying that in that interview, by denying the claims that she made as well as the claims by his now ex-wife, that he broke that agreement. And as you know, yesterday, she also filed a restraining order.
Right, because he's basically saying there are not multiple allegations, right? He doesn't want this to sound like it's piling up. And so he reached back to this conversation and she's like, no, keep me out of it.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about the Moreno family. The senator, Bernie Moreno, has been obviously very upset and frustrated. He has called for Miller to step down, saying he shouldn't be in Congress anymore. Joining him, Senator Shelley Moore Capito and Roger Marshall. Are we going to see any other senators speak up?
I think Rick Scott might have said something to that effect. Yeah, I don't know.
When does it reach the House, the people who actually work with this guy?
I think it's getting to that point now. We're seeing signals coming out of the White House where at least Trump is apparently privately saying that he doesn't think Max Miller can win re-election. That seems like the beginnings of kind of a subtle pressure campaign to convince this person to at least step aside from his re-election campaign. And there's a very good reason for that, even aside from kind of the details of the allegations. This is a district that Republicans would worry about losing if Max Miller is on the ballot in November. Yeah. That's the same with some of these other congressmen, which we're talking about.
But now we're talking about family. So, for instance, Senator Moreno, like I said, he put out a statement where he says, as he admitted privately, Max Miller needs serious psychological help. He's a danger to my daughter. I hold my breath every minute he has custody of my granddaughter. And then also this audio obtained from earlier this year. Emily Moreno is telling police about an incident on New Year's Eve where she alleged that Miller held a gun to her head when she was changing their infant daughter. So just give you a moment to listen to this.
So when does the gun come into play?
When I'm changing.
And what does he do?
Holds it on me.
Holds it on you? Okay. Can you show me where he held it to you? No, hey, it's okay. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Like I said, that's a hard thing to talk about.
Has he said anything about this incident or others? Because I know he released his own Dropbox of audio, so he does want people to kind of hear his side as he's denying these allegations.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem, is that he keeps releasing more and more information and more evidence that can then be used against him in certain cases. He does deny that this incident even happened.
What does he say about his father-in-law? Has he talked about what's going on publicly?
So for a long time, he said that they could work together. He said that he could walk and chew gum at the same time. But after a while, he was saying that his father-in-law was helping his daughter, enabling her in what he said was lying. And so that is when he started taking to social media to criticize him. Bernie Moreno didn't say anything for a very long time. His team consistently said no comment until Sunday. And that is when he released that scathing post on X.
So Miller's ex-wife, as you noted, is not the only woman to accuse him of abuse. Former White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham, Trump's first-term press secretary, was also Miller's ex-girlfriend. She detailed an abusive relationship with an unnamed White House staffer in her memoir. Later, that was identified as Max Miller. Miller also denies these allegations. Stephanie Grisham was on The Lead in 2021 talking about that relationship. Take a listen.
I had an ex that I dated, and there was abuse in every way there. And that's something I actually told the president and the first lady about, and they did nothing.
The person you're talking about, you don't name him in the book, but his name is Max Miller. He is running for Congress, and it's not just that President Trump, then President Trump, didn't do anything about it. Trump is now backing this guy for Congress.
I'm not going to lie, it was like a gut punch when I saw that he endorsed him.
Now, in response to Grisham's book, then Trump said that Grisham shouldn't be taken seriously because she was, quote, very angry and bitter after the breakup. So the idea that President Trump is standing by a guy accused of some horrific behavior, abusive behavior, is not new.
No, it's not new. We've seen a long pattern of this with Trump, and Trump often feels that he's the victim and subject of false allegations and so forth. But I watched that video, and one, bad communications politically 101. Yeah. He looked like somebody on an episode of SVU where you're like, oh, he definitely did it. This is not how you want to communicate to your constituents. It's why the best thing to do would be to drop him now so you can replace him. And ultimately, as Republicans, we stood really tall against Graham Plattner on all the awful things that have been alleged about him. And he, thank God, yeah, and they got out. Let's do the right thing on our side now at this point.
Joining me now, Democratic strategist Julie Roginski. She's also the author of the Substack column, Salty Politics. Julie, thank you for being here. I mean, the latest reporting is that Trump told Miller privately that his reelection is not going to be easy. But you heard his comments today where he called Miller a very good person and refused to get involved. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that Donald Trump couldn't care less about women. We've known that all along. We've certainly known that going back to the allegations against him over and over and over again. I think, in fact, he sees these kinds of allegations and automatically gets defensive and disbelieves the woman, or at least doesn't want to acknowledge that this is something that women should come forward and talk about. Look, this is not the first time that Max Miller has been alleged to be a domestic abuser. Stephanie Grisham, Donald Trump's former White House press secretary, publicly said that she told both the First Lady and President Trump during the first term that Max Miller had done this to her, and she said that they didn't really care, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that she ended up severing her ties to them. Look, how many times does the president need to hear from how many women that this man is not fit for office and that he's an abuser before he starts to take these concerns seriously? And while, of course, this is something that's between Emily Moreno and her ex-husband, it also has to do with who's fit or unfit for office. And this is not the first time the president has heard these kinds of allegations, and she is not the first woman from whom he's heard those kinds of allegations. Now,
Miller denies all the allegations of domestic abuse against him from every source. And I want to play you one moment from his statement yesterday it's been drawing a lot of criticism. Listen.
Only weeks later did the story of February 1st assault appear, so ask yourself, if I had assaulted her, would she have offered to cook me dinner 6 days later?
Look, I was a prosecutor for domestic violence cases, and I think it is so insulting to think that people could assume the behavior of somebody who is victimized. His statement, particularly crass from my prosecutorial experience, but how do you feel about how he's been addressing the allegations?
I mean, that made my blood boil probably more than anything else. How many times have we heard stories about women who, for whatever reason, can't leave or just are in no position to leave, particularly if they're mothers, particularly if they share a child with their alleged abuser? How many times have we heard women, for one reason or another, stay after being abused and then something happens, and sometimes they don't survive those situations. You know better than anybody else as a former prosecutor exactly what happens in those kinds of situations. I've never been in that situation myself, but I certainly talked to enough survivors over the course of my nonprofit work to know that this is not atypical. So even if you take him at his word, that 6 days later she offered to cook him dinner, which is a very weird turn of phrase to begin with also, a little trad wifey there that he's putting her in that position. Look, you have the Republican senator from the state of Ohio, somebody who has zero interest in seeing a Democrat win the seat, break his silence after many, many, many days, for my opinion, waited a little too long to do that, finally say that he holds his breath when his granddaughter is in the presence of her father. And that's still not good enough for the President of the United States to listen to a senator of his own party, somebody who he supported and continues to support very strongly politically. Still, this isn't good enough. I mean, at some point, I think, look, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Democrats just went through something similar, although allegations not quite like this, but still very bad allegations in Graham Plattner in Maine. You have to stop and just think, this should not be a partisan issue. It doesn't matter if somebody has a D or an R after their name. And I said that about Graham Plattner months ago and got a lot of into a lot of trouble from members of my own party for saying so. But I say this to my Republican friends, my God, look in the mirror. Surely there is somebody other than Max Miller who can run for the seat while there's still time. And surely, even if Max Miller decides to stay here, this is not somebody who's fit to be in office, even if he agrees with you on every political issue you stand for. There are things in life more important than politics. The safety of women, the safety of children should be chief among them. And for some reason, I don't understand why we're in a world right now where you have Republicans who just can't say that Max Miller needs to go, starting with the President of the United States.